In the Middle Ages, children weren't children. They were workers, caretakers, punishments waiting to happen. Imagine a child of 5, not curled in a warm bed, not tracing finger paint suns on the wall, but ankle deep in muck, hauling a sloshing bucket through a street that reeks of dung and rot. Their hands are raw from cold, their belly half empty, and somewhere behind them, a baby cries, a sibling, maybe. Maybe not. Doesn't matter. It's their job to hush it. There are no toys here. No storybooks. No grown-ups kneeling down to ask, "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Only tasks. And consequences. You weren't someone's baby, you were a labor waiting to happen. And if you didn't die before your 10th birthday, congratulations. You were one of the lucky ones. One of the few. Because death was never far. It hovered in the feverish breath of an infant. It hid in water, in wounds, in winter. It came quietly. And it came often. So forget everything you think you know about childhood. This isn't about playgrounds or plush animals. This is about survival. In a time that barely noticed if you lived or died. Dim the lights. Draw closer. And let me show you what it meant to be a child in the Middle Ages. A world where innocence was irrelevant, and the only thing that mattered was making it to morning. The bucket hits the ground with a dull thud. Mud spatters bare legs. The child, let's call her Avellini, doesn't flinch. She's 5 years old, but there's no baby fat left in her face. Her eyes, solemn and searching, flick toward the cottage door. Inside, her mother is tending to the fire. Or rather, trying to. The hearth spits more smoke than heat, and the bundled infant swaddled in rough linen won't stop coughing. Avellini doesn't wait for permission. She scoops up a smaller pail and heads to the well again. Hauling water is her job now. One of them. Because no one is too young for responsibility here. In the 13th century, you're not raised to believe the world is soft. You're raised to believe it's yours to serve. Childhood, as we think of it today, that sacred window of play and protection, simply doesn't exist. Not in the peasant village. Not in the noble manor. Not in the monastery or the muddy streets. The word child doesn't mean what you think it does. It's not a category of innocence. It's a stage of incompletion, a soul not yet baked, a body not yet useful. And most of all, it's temporary. Painfully, perilously temporary. You were a child only so long as you were unprofitable. The Church, which hovered over every facet of medieval life, saw children less as pure spirits and more as miniature sinners. Born with the stain of original sin, they were considered morally bent from the start. Discipline wasn't cruelty, it was salvation. A child's soul was something to be beaten toward heaven, not coddled into joy. Philosophers and theologians of the era debated whether children could even reason. Could they love? Could they think? One prominent view held that children were like beasts, driven by base impulse, incapable of higher virtue. So the job of every adult was to train them. Not love them, necessarily. Not even protect them. Just shape them, mold them, keep them from damnation. And so, the moment you could walk, you worked. The moment you could talk, you obeyed. And the moment you disobeyed, you'd learn. Quickly. Painfully. But I'm getting ahead of us. Let's walk a little farther, down this dirt-packed road. Past Avellini's hut. Past the blacksmith's cottage where a 10-year-old boy is stoking the coals, his arms red from the heat. Past the cart where a noblewoman's daughter, not yet 8, is being prepared for her journey to another estate. Not to visit. To be married. Yes, married. You see, even age meant little. Puberty. And sometimes not even that, marked the end of whatever frail concept of childhood existed. A girl who bled was a woman. A boy with strength was a worker, a soldier, a monk in training. There was no adolescence. No teenage rebellion. No gap year to find yourself. You were either growing toward usefulness, or you were dead weight. Even art and literature of the time reflect this. Children are rarely depicted at play. They are drawn, painted, and written as small adults, proportionally odd, yes, but clothed and posed like their parents. Because that's how they were seen. There were exceptions, of course, moments of tenderness buried in the soil of this brutal world. A carved toy horse here. A lullaby hummed by a mother who knows she may not have her baby tomorrow. A father who, after a long day in the fields, teaches his son to whittle not out of necessity, but just to be near him. But these were flickers. Not expectations. Not rites. So ask yourself, as we pass the village square where a girl helps pluck chickens and a boy tries not to cough too loudly, lest he be thought weak. What was a child in the Middle Ages? The answer is simple. A resource. A risk. A soul in danger. A set of hands. Not someone to become. Someone to use. And that is where we begin. Let's keep walking. The church bell is ringing now, not for a wedding. Not for a feast. It tolls low and long. A child has died. The bell rings low. Once. Then again. The sound rolls over the rooftops like morning fog, slow, ancient, and thick with meaning. You hear it in your chest more than your ears. Not frantic, not shrill. Just a gentle summons. Everyone knows what it means. It's the death bell. A child has passed. No one rushes. There is no hysteria, no public wailing. In this village, death is a neighbor, always nearby, rarely surprised to be invited in. We cross the square quietly now. Past the alehouse where no one is drinking yet. Past the baker's hut where the oven is already glowing. And there, near the chapel, stands a small group of villagers in muted wool, heads bowed, hands still. A priest murmurs prayers in Latin. Few understand the words, but they know their purpose. The child, you can just make out the bundle in the woman's arms, is wrapped in linen, freshly sewn. No embroidery. No cradle. Just a clean cloth and the scent of rosemary, tucked into the folds. The herbs are for the soul, yes, but also for the smell. And yet, the mother holds her baby the way mothers have always held their children. Gently. Firmly. As if warmth alone could still convince breath to return. But it won't. Because in the Middle Ages, the chances of a child reaching adulthood are a coin toss at best. Half of all children die before their 10th birthday. Many don't survive the first week. The first day. The first hour. Infant mortality isn't a tragedy. It's a rhythm. A fact. An expectation woven into daily life. And yet, they love them anyway. Not loudly, perhaps. Not indulgently. There are no baby showers, no pastel clothes, no rooms painted in hopeful colors. But beneath the silence, love exists, aching, practical, restrained by fear but unmistakable in its form. A mother singing under her breath as she boils laundry. A father pausing to carve a little bird into the cradle rail. These are not people who don't love their children. These are people who love them anyway. Despite knowing they may not get to keep them. We slip through the chapel's threshold now. Inside, the air is thick with wax and damp stone. A basin of holy water gleams beside the door, and the crucifix above the altar catches the morning light just enough to make the room feel, not brighter, exactly, but watched. Held. The baby is placed on a wooden table before the altar. The priest begins the baptism. There is urgency here. In this world, baptism is not merely ceremony, it is salvation. Without it, the child's soul is thought to drift in limbo, unclaimed, unwashed. Neither in hell nor heaven, but somewhere in between. That is a fate no parent wants for their child. So babies are baptized as quickly as possible, often within hours of birth. Sometimes at home, by a midwife if death seems near. Water is poured. Words are spoken. A soul is marked. The Church teaches that this is the moment the child is no longer damned. Not that they were ever evil, but born in sin, like all of us. Even their innocence, sweet as it may seem, is not enough. Original sin does not spare babies. You might find that cruel. But in a strange way, it also reflects the seriousness with which medieval people viewed childhood. These were not just tiny bodies. They were eternal souls. Vulnerable, sacred, and already at risk. Once baptized, the child is given a name. A real name. Until then, many are called only baby, little one, God's child. It's a kind of emotional shield. Naming means acknowledging, belonging, letting the heart open just a little wider. And so, this child is now named. We'll call her Marjorie. The name of saints and grandmothers and hopeful mothers across 1,000 years. Marjorie. She existed. She was held. She was baptized. And now she is gone. We step outside as the bell tolls again, softer this time. The villagers drift away. There is barley to grind, milk to fetch, a plough to fix. The fields do not pause for grief. And the mother? She returns home with her husband. She will likely conceive again. Most women do. It is expected. Not because one child replaces another, but because life demands it. Large families are not about luxury. They are about odds. You see, in the medieval world, you don't raise 6 children because you want a big family. You raise 6 because you need at least 2 to survive. That's the quiet math of peasant life. Of course, some families bury more than they raise. Some lose child after child and still rise at dawn the next day to milk the goat and mend the fence. And how do they survive that? They don't always. Some break. Quietly. A mother who never sings again. A father who never carves another cradle. Grief does not always announce itself in screams. Sometimes it just goes silent. But most carry on. Because they must. Because the baby needs milk. The bread needs baking. The next child is coming. And in this way, the medieval world moves forward, slow, grim, determined. Like a wheel turning under a heavy load. You may wonder, did they love their children less because death was so common? No. But they loved differently. They loved with caution. With prayer. With a kind of fierce, practical devotion that didn't always look like affection, but was. They built their love into blankets, into chores, into whispered prayers by the fire. They didn't write poems about childhood. They just endured it. And maybe that, in the end, is a deeper kind of love. We keep walking now. Away from the chapel. Past the orchard where 2 older boys are climbing trees to chase off crows. Past the creek where a girl washes linen, her small hands red with cold. They are alive today. Tomorrow? We do not know. But for now they live. They laugh. They work. And childhood, such as it is, continues. Let's follow it further. Down the path where the goats graze. Toward the fields where smaller shadows move beside taller ones. They are not playing. They are working. Because childhood, here, is not an escape from labor. It is labor. And that is where we go next. Come with me, we're leaving the chapel now. The morning mist still clings to the thatched roofs and curls around the bare ankles of children in the village square. But the air has shifted. The sadness has settled into silence, and the village, like it always must, is waking up fully. In the field to our left, a boy not more than 7 is tugging a stubborn goat toward the grazing paddock. He clicks his tongue, murmurs something under his breath, and gives the rope a sharp little tug. The goat obeys barely. This is Thomas. And Thomas is already a worker. But don't pity him. Not yet. Because for Thomas, this is not punishment. This is his place. His job. His pride. And for many children like him in the Middle Ages, labor wasn't always seen as a tragedy. It was an introduction to the world, to the family, to belonging. You see, in a time when survival depended on every set of hands, even the smallest, children contributed early. As young as 4 or 5, they would be expected to help in some way. Not from cruelty, but necessity. And while the work could be hard, and sometimes dangerous, it was also woven into the rhythm of life. A shared rhythm. One that bound children to their families in ways both practical and profound. Let's walk with Thomas a while. He loops the goat's rope around a wooden stake and jogs. Yes, jogs. Back toward the cottage where his older sister is already feeding the hens. The hen house is a bit crooked, the straw inside already trampled, but she scatters grain with practiced ease. Her name is Joan. She's 10. Joan has been helping prepare meals since she was tall enough to reach the hearth without setting herself on fire. She kneads dough now with her mother each morning, mashes root vegetables with a carved wooden pestle, and keeps the fire from going out by feeding it little sticks collected at dawn. She doesn't call it chores. There is no sulking, no eye rolls. There is simply the understanding this is her part. Her portion of the family weight. Their mother, Margot, is 32, and already a grandmother by today's standards. She watches her children work with quiet approval. Not out of distance, but pride. Each task they take on makes life a little more bearable. A little more possible. And yes, it's not always gentle. The water bucket Thomas carried yesterday was heavy enough to bruise his shoulder. The hearth is a constant source of burns. Joan has a scar on her wrist where she once brushed too close to the iron pot. But there's another side to it, too. Work means inclusion. Trust. Responsibility. A sense that you matter. Imagine being 7 years old and knowing the goat is your goat to lead. That your hands stirred the pottage the family eats. That when your baby brother cries, your lullaby is what hushes him. In the medieval world, there is no when you grow up. You're already in motion, already useful, already needed. And there is comfort in that, in a strange way. The comfort of routine, of shared effort, of early competence. Let's leave the cottage and walk through the fields. Here we see other children, not playing, but moving in quiet rhythm with their parents. A boy, maybe 8, carries a bundle of sticks twice his size. He trips, grunts, stands again. No one scolds him. They just nod when he rights himself and keeps walking. A girl, hair in braids, cheeks smudged with ash, is grinding barley with a stone mill. The sound is steady, soothing. Round and round, the wheel turns. Older children might herd sheep, collect dung for fuel, weed vegetable beds, mend nets, or carry messages between neighbors. In towns, they might apprentice early, sweeping the smithy floor, fetching tools for a tailor, running errands for a baker. It's not glamorous. It's not idyllic. But it's not cruelty either. It's continuity. Of course, it wasn't the same for all children. Richer households had nursemaids and wet nurses, tutors and servants. Some noble children would never touch a broom or a bucket in their lives. But even among them, the idea of contributing was paramount. A lord's son would train to ride, to fight, to manage land. A noble girl would learn to manage a household, weave fine linens, host guests, preserve status. The expectation of usefulness was universal, only the nature of the labor changed. We pause now at the edge of the forest. Here, 2 boys are gathering kindling beneath the trees. They work fast, glancing occasionally over their shoulders. Not because they're afraid of wolves, but because the woods are exciting. A place for whispered stories and found treasures. Children didn't always work under harsh glares. Many worked alongside siblings, friends, and parents. And in that closeness, bonds grew. Jokes were shared. Songs were sung. Lessons passed down not in lectures, but in motion. A father sharpening a scythe might show his son how to feel for the angle, the weight. A mother spinning wool might hum to her daughter and explain how to check for weak thread. Stories would slip in, tales of foolish kings, clever foxes, saints and devils, until the task was done. It wasn't school, but it was education. The world taught by doing. And if you were lucky, you had someone kind to teach you how. Let's return to the village square. The sun is rising now, a soft gold filtering through the mist. A group of children carry baskets toward the well. A younger boy lags behind, and a girl, maybe 9, reaches back to take his hand. She doesn't scold. She waits. Even in hardship, there is gentleness. Even in labor, there is play. Not the kind of play we think of, no board games, no toy boxes, but a kind of spirited mischief tucked into the work. A race to finish sweeping. A game of who can catch the most beetles? A stolen moment to splash in the river before the washing is done. They laugh. They squabble. They chase each other between tasks. Life finds a way to bloom between the lines of duty. And if you ask them, really ask them, they might not even see their lives as hard. It is just what is. No child dreams of leisure if they've never known it. They dream of food, of warm shoes, of a good harvest, of growing strong enough to plow, tall enough to spin, to be useful, to be seen, and that, perhaps more than anything, is the heart of childhood labor in the Middle Ages. Not exploitation, not always, but a lifelong invitation to belong, to matter, to carry your corner of the world, even if it's heavy, especially if it's heavy. We leave the village now, just for a moment. Follow the path to the hilltop and look back. Do you see it? A living rhythm. Smoke curling from chimneys. Children running, trudging, carrying, stirring. Eyes bright. Backs bent. Tiny hands already learning the world by touching it, lifting it, holding it together. This is childhood. Not idle. Not protected. But undeniably present. And still, beneath the work, a new lesson is being shaped, one not taught by the fields, but by discipline. Because love in this world doesn't always wear kindness on its face. Sometimes it wears the rod. But that's a path we'll take next, slowly, carefully. There's more to understand before we judge. So stay with me. The day is still young. Let's walk back down from the hill now. The village has settled into its mid-morning rhythm. The rush of dawn has passed, and the workday is underway. You can hear the clatter of tools, the soft bleating of goats, the creak of carts over dirt roads. And every so often, a sharp cry. Not of pain. Not exactly. But of correction. We turn the corner, and there, behind a thatched cottage, a boy stands sniffling with his head bowed. His father, face stern but not angry, leans over to tie up a bundle of switches. Hazel twigs, likely. Thin and springy. Chosen carefully. This is not a moment of rage. It is a ritual. Because here in the Middle Ages, discipline is not a matter of emotion. It is theology. It is necessity. It is, in the minds of those who wield it, a form of love. Spare the rod, spoil the child. That phrase doesn't come from some Victorian child-rearing manual. It comes from the Book of Proverbs. And in medieval Europe, Scripture is not a suggestion, it is law. Law for the body. Law for the soul. A disobedient child is not just frustrating, they are at risk. Not of embarrassment. Of damnation. So discipline is sacred. It's salvation with splinters. Let's follow the boy for a moment. His name is Adam. He's 10. He forgot to tether the goat properly, and it wandered into the neighbor's field. The punishment is swift, a few strikes to the back of the legs. Enough to sting. Enough to remember. Then it's done. No lecture. No lingering. He limps slightly, but the moment his father turns away, Adam rubs his eyes and returns to his chores. Not because he has no choice, Because he understands. It's not that children didn't feel resentment. They did. But the structure was clear, consistent, and often, though not always, tempered with fairness. To us, it may seem brutal, unforgivable. But to a medieval parent, correction was an act of mercy. Better a sore hand today than a damned soul tomorrow. You may wonder, were there no alternatives? Yes, there were. Children were sometimes corrected with scoldings, chores, fasting, or isolation. But physical punishment was seen as the most direct, most biblical method. Quick, memorable, effective. In monasteries and church schools, for the rare children who attended, discipline could be even more severe. Canes, birch rods, and leather straps were common tools in the schoolmaster's arsenal. Not for cruelty's sake, but to enforce obedience, order, and piety. Even curiosity could be punished. A child asking the wrong question, especially about scripture or authority, might be accused of pride. Pride was dangerous. Pride led to rebellion. And rebellion, in the medieval mind, was a direct route to hell. So humility was taught with sharp edges. But let's not reduce the entire experience to pain. Because discipline also carried a strange kind of intimacy. To be punished meant someone was paying attention. Someone cared enough to mold you, to shape you into something better. It wasn't always just about control, sometimes it was about hope. The mother who grips her daughter's wrist and says, "You must not speak to strange men, not because I hate you, but because I want to see you married, not shamed." The grandfather who cuffs his grandson's ear after catching him stealing eggs, not because he's angry at the theft, but because stealing means hanging. And he's seen that rope too many times. There are limits, of course. Not every punishment was just. Not every adult was patient. Violence and cruelty existed, as they do in every age. But in the broad strokes of daily life, discipline was a structure, not a storm. Let's walk through the orchard now. Listen. A girl, maybe 12, is being scolded by her aunt. She broke the handle on the butter churn. The aunt's voice is stern, her gestures sharp, but her hands are busy repairing the damage even as she lectures. The lesson is woven into the work. Children were expected to endure discipline the way they endured cold, hunger, and labor, not with joy, but with resignation. It was part of the world, part of growing up. And here's a curious thing: many children, once grown, adopted the very same methods. They disciplined their own children in the same way, with the same tone, the same switch, the same sigh of reluctant duty. Because to them, that was how you raised someone strong, someone safe. Now pause with me by the fire. Here, in the shadow of a low cottage wall, a young boy sits beside his mother, holding out his palm. She applies a smear of ointment to a red welt. One strike too many, perhaps, or a brush with a thorn bush while foraging. She hums softly, blows gently on the skin, and murmurs something about St. Bridget's protection. There's love here. Quiet, unsentimental love. A love that disciplines, but also soothes. That scolds, and then wraps you in a wool cloak when the wind rises. To our ears, it may sound like contradiction, but to theirs, it was balance. To raise a child meant to teach them the weight of the world early, because the world would not wait. And the rod, they believed, made the load lighter. There are no tantrums here. No defiance in the modern sense. Children were not given choices. They were given examples. You followed. You obeyed. You endured. And if you were lucky, someone watched you closely enough to correct you, not out of cruelty, but out of a belief that your soul was worth saving. We move again, back toward the village edge. The sun is high now. The world warm. A group of children are gathering firewood, and one of them laughs, a big, toothy laugh, echoing across the path. Another throws a clump of moss. It lands harmlessly. They are not afraid right now. Discipline lives here, yes. But so does freedom, in small, careful doses. When the work is done. When no one is watching too closely. And tomorrow, someone else may forget a chore. Spill the milk. Talk back. And the rod may come out again. But for now, they are just children. And the world, however harsh, lets them be. Even for just a moment. Let's keep walking. Something light stirs in the air, not the scent of punishment, but of mischief. Something playful. Something reckless. Can you hear it? Laughter. Screams. Wood clacking against wood. Someone's daring fate. It's time we talked about play. But not the kind you're expecting. Let's follow the sound. It's coming from the far end of the village now, near the open field where the hay is still flattened from the last harvest. The sharp laughter cuts through the morning like birdsong. A rare music in this world. We draw closer. There they are. Children, barefoot, wild-haired, faces flushed with dirt and freedom, are sprinting through the grass. Some carry sticks. One has a wooden hoop. Another, the oldest perhaps, holds what looks like. Is that a pig's bladder? Yes. Yes, it is. Inflated, tied off, still faintly translucent. It bobs through the air as he throws it, and the others shriek with delight, diving after it like it's treasure from the Holy Land. Welcome to medieval playtime. It doesn't happen often. There's no scheduled recess, no swing sets or safety mats. But when it does happen, when the chores are done, the weather's good, and no adults are shouting for help, children in the Middle Ages do what children everywhere have always done. They run. They yell. They imagine. And they play. Not in the ways we might expect. There are no plush animals, no plastic swords, no carefully labeled boxes of educational toys. But there is ingenuity. Endless, rough-edged, half-feral creativity. Let's sit here for a moment, just at the edge of the field, and watch. One boy has a piece of rope tied around his waist like a knight's belt. His tunic is too large, and the sleeves flap as he brandishes a stick toward a group of younger children huddled behind a broken wheelbarrow. "You are the Saracens!" he declares. "I'm King Richard." The others squeal in protest. "No! I'm the king!" A short, messy debate follows. It ends, as many things do, in someone getting gently smacked on the head with a pinecone. They don't stop playing. This is the world of medieval games, a strange blend of imitation, chaos, and a total disregard for health and safety. It's not about amusement so much as release. Play is not soft here. It is loud, messy, competitive, and more often than you'd like to admit, just a little bit violent. Let's walk a little further, into the back lane near the blacksmith's shop. Here, two girls crouch beside a muddy puddle, poking at it with sticks. They've shaped tiny figures out of bits of cloth and twigs, crude dolls with thread for hair. One is named Agnes. The other, amusingly, is named Lady Fartbottom. They are reenacting a wedding. Agnes is marrying a rat. This is what play looks like when your world is built from scraps. Every object is a potential toy. Bones become dice. Rocks become animals. Cartwheels become merry-go-rounds, if you're brave enough to ride one downhill. The dangers are real, of course. Playgrounds don't exist, and there are no helmets, no soft landings. A game of King of the Hill might end with a dislocated shoulder. A cart race down the lane might end in a broken nose. No one is suing anyone. No one is filing a report. You get up, you cry a bit, you carry on. The most popular games mimic adult life: war, work, weddings. Children pretend to be priests, farmers, kings, mothers. They imitate what they see, sometimes with eerie accuracy. It's not uncommon to find a group of children holding mock trials, punishing a criminal, usually a younger sibling, or staging a pretend funeral for a dead mouse. You might think it morbid, but in their world, these things are not macabre. They are familiar, ordinary. Play is how they make sense of the world. And sometimes, it's how they rebel against it. In the city streets, London, Paris, Bruges, boys gather in rowdy clusters to play ball, a game somewhere between soccer and small-scale warfare. There are no teams, no rules, and very few survivors without scrapes. The ball itself could be anything: leather-stuffed rags, a pig's bladder, or even a carved lump of wood. The goals? Not always clear. Sometimes it's a doorway. Sometimes it's just get it past the baker's shop and back. It's loud. It's rough. It often ends in property damage. It's also banned frequently by town councils. Of course, this makes it more popular. One 14th century ordinance in London forbids children from playing ball games in the churchyard, lest they damage the graves or break the windows of the holy house, which tells you everything you need to know about how those games went. But still, they play. Because even in a world of discipline, labor, and fear, children are not made of silence. They are made of noise, and laughter, and bruised knees. Let's stop now in a little side yard behind the tavern. Here, two younger children, siblings, it seems, are playing a quieter game. One draws in the dirt with a stick. The other tries to guess what it is. A chicken? A fish? A devil? No. It's their father. See the big nose? They giggle, ducking their heads in case anyone overhears. These small moments, often unseen, undocumented, are the heart of medieval childhood. Not grand. Not idealized. But real. And what about toys? Oh, they existed. In their own way. We know from archaeological finds that medieval children had wooden dolls, spinning tops, whistles, miniature carts, and even hobby horses. Some noble children had elaborate carved figurines or little silver charms. But most toys were handmade, simple, sturdy, and deeply loved. A doll made of rags might be passed down through generations. A favorite stick might become a sword one day, a plow the next. They didn't have much, but they had enough. And sometimes they played with fire. Literally. One of the more dangerous but oddly common pastimes was called fire skipping, where children would leap over small fires for sport. It was thrilling. It was stupid. It was absolutely medieval. Accidents happened. Burns were common. Adults shouted. No one stopped. Because joy, even dangerous joy, was rare. And when it came, children seized it with both grubby hands. Now, as the sun shifts toward midday, the games begin to break up. A mother calls from the cottage window. A baby cries. A boy is scolded for tracking mud into the house. The children scatter, reluctant, dirty, grinning, and the field quiets again. Did they have playtime like we do? No. But they had something just as vital: release. Freedom. The occasional, precious reminder that they were still young, still human, in a world that so often treated them otherwise. Even in this brutal, disciplined, cold world, laughter found its way through the cracks. They played not despite the harshness, but because of it. And now, as the shadows lengthen and the air cools, we return to the path. Not all play was equal. Not all childhoods were shaped the same. Because in this world, gender meant everything. And what it meant to be a girl, or a boy, wasn't just biology. It was destiny. Let's step into the next path now, where a girl is being fitted for her first real headscarf. She's 7. It's time she learned what the world expects. And we must learn it too. The girl stands still as her mother adjusts the cloth over her hair. It's not silk. Nothing close. Just a length of homespun linen, dyed pale brown with onion skin and river water. But the act of tying it, folding, tucking, smoothing it into place, feels ceremonial. She's 7 years old today. Old enough, her mother says. Old enough to cover her hair. Old enough to sit with the women when they spin wool. Old enough to stop climbing trees and running with the boys through muddy fields. Her name is Alice. And whether she understands it or not, her childhood is over. We're still in the same village, still among the same cottages and fields. But everything looks different when you understand this. In the Middle Ages, gender wasn't just identity. It was instruction. It told you what to wear, how to walk, when to speak, who you would become, who you could never be. Let's begin at the beginning. At birth, there were no pink blankets. No gender reveal parties with colored cakes or exploding barrels of symbolism. But the moment a midwife shouted, "It's a girl!" or "It's a boy!" the room changed. A daughter meant future dowries, marriages, labor in the home. A boy meant strength in the field, maybe a legacy, maybe a priest. Girls were swaddled tightly, often more modestly than boys. Their names were chosen from saints and mothers: Margaret, Agnes, Matilda, Alice. Boys might be named for warriors, apostles, or kings. By age 3 or 4, the differences became clearer. Boys were allowed to wander further, to speak louder. They carried tools, small hammers, carved wooden plows. Girls were handed tiny brooms, bundles of thread, dolls shaped like mothers. It wasn't cruel. It was custom. And for most families, tradition mattered more than fairness. We pass by another house now, the manor house this time. A very different world, but one still ruled by gender. Inside, a noble boy no older than 10 is being fitted with a small dagger. His father instructs him on how to wear it. Not for violence. Not yet. But for readiness. For manhood. Soon, he'll begin his training as a page. He'll serve another noble household, not as a guest, but as a servant in noble clothing. He'll carry messages, attend feasts, hold horses, learn to pour wine correctly. And, most importantly, he'll learn to fight. With sword, lance, and body. Because to be a boy, especially one with status, was to be pointed toward violence. Knighthood was not about glory. It was about obligation. Boys trained early, bruised often, and bled young. We return to the village now. There, by the hearth, sits Alice again. She's watching her mother spin wool. Her hands mimic the motion in the air, learning by imitation. No one explains the steps in detail. You learn by doing. You're expected to watch, remember, repeat. By 10 or 11, girls were often the second mother of the household, cooking, mending, tending to younger siblings. Their value was measured not in imagination or ambition, but in how well they could keep a home running. And always, there was the shadow of marriage. A girl might be promised by the time she's 8. Married by 12. Pregnant by 14. That wasn't every girl's path, but it was common enough to be unremarkable. Let's walk now to the edge of the village, to the small convent nestled between fields and woodland. Inside, a girl kneels in prayer. Her name is Cecily. She's 9. She's not playing at religion. She's preparing. Her family couldn't afford a dowry, so she's being offered to the church instead. A holy bride, as they say. She'll learn to read, maybe Latin, if she's lucky. She'll take vows of poverty, chastity, obedience. And one day, she'll wear the veil and become a nun. You might imagine her weeping, frightened, resisting. But she is calm. Because for many girls, the convent offered something that marriage never could: safety, education, a chance to survive beyond childbirth, a room of her own. And so, Cecily prays. Not because she's been forced. Because she understands. Let's return once more to the boys. They don't escape roles either. If you're not nobility, you won't become a knight. But you will be taught to obey, to labor, to withstand. Strength is praised. Gentleness is not. Emotions are sharpened into tools. By 7 or 8, a boy might be apprenticed to a craftsman, a blacksmith, a carpenter, a cooper. His days are spent sweeping floors, boiling glue, fetching tools, until, in time, his hands grow steady and he becomes useful. The master teaches by correction. Mistakes are often met with cuffs to the ear or stinging rebukes. There is no coddling. No. Take your time. No. Do what you love. There is only, do what you're told. We pass now through the churchyard, where the priest teaches a rare group of village boys how to read scripture. Only a few, those with promise or connections, will continue. The rest will return to the plow. It is a narrow ladder, and few climb far. But whether noble or peasant boy or girl, one thing is true. You do not get to choose who you become. Not really. You are shaped, slowly, carefully, sometimes cruelly, by those around you. Your gender is not a trait. It is a path. A girl learns to lower her gaze, to move quietly, to make herself small. A boy learns to stand tall, to work harder, to never admit weakness. This world is not interested in your inner life. It wants your service. And yet, beneath all this, beneath the rules, the rituals, the roles, something still shines through. In a glance across the field. In a whispered story told by candlelight. In a stolen hour before dawn, when a girl practices writing letters in ash on a floorboard, and dares to dream of something else. Or in a boy who sings to himself while carrying wood. Who hums not because he must, but because he can. Not every child fits the mold. And not every path ends where it's supposed to. But for most, the path is narrow, marked from the start. And the world watches closely to make sure you stay on it. The bell tolls again, a softer sound now. Not for death, but for mass. The children file in, boys to the front, girls to the side. Eyes forward, hands folded. And before them, the painted saints on the wall look down with holy, frozen stares. Because now we step into the most powerful force shaping these childhoods. Not hunger, not cold, not work, but God. Or at least, what they were told He wanted. The stone chapel is cool and dim. Its narrow windows let in shafts of dusty light that fall like ladders across the worn flagstones. You can hear a bird calling somewhere beyond the walls, distant, disinterested. Inside, there is only silence, except for the rustle of wool against wood, and the soft whisper of Latin prayers, murmured by voices too young to understand their meaning. The children sit still. Stillness is survival here. This is not Sunday Mass. This is daily instruction. Catechism. The shaping of minds and souls. Not just what to believe, but how to fear. Because in the Middle Ages, religion is not a comfort blanket. It is a compass. And a cage. From the moment a child is baptized, often just hours after birth, they are not merely welcomed into a faith. They are claimed by it. The church becomes their second parent. Sometimes their first. And that parent demands obedience. Let's sit here, just behind the pillar. Listen closely. The priest is not cruel. His voice is gentle, in fact. Patient. But the words he speaks, or rather, the truths he presents, are heavy. The soul is always in danger. A child must not lie. Must not steal. Must not disobey. Because even small sins can stain the soul. And a stained soul, well, there are consequences. Hell is not abstract here. It's not a distant, theoretical place. It is vivid, terrifying, real. Children are taught to fear it early. They see it in painted murals, demons dragging souls into flames, jaws of monstrous beasts swallowing sinners whole. They hear it in sermons, in stories told at the fireside, in whispered warnings from parents. God sees you. The eyes of the Lord are everywhere. watching, judging, waiting. So even a child's inner thoughts become suspect. Jealousy, pride, anger, curiosity. The 7 deadly sins don't come with age limits. And the fear? It's not just about punishment. It's about missing heaven. Imagine being 5 years old and being told that one wrong word, one moment of disobedience, could separate you from God forever. Imagine that pressure sitting in your tiny chest every day. It's no wonder that some children cry during Massachusetts. Not from boredom. From fear. We step outside now, back into the light. The sun is warm, the grass wet with dew. And yet the solemnity clings to us like a cloak. Because faith in the medieval world doesn't stay in church. It follows you. At meals you cross yourself. At dawn and dusk you say your prayers. Before you sleep you ask forgiveness, in case you die in the night. Even games are touched by God. Children play, devils chase, or act out saints lives in mock theater. And every illness, every injury, every strange dream might be a sign, or a punishment. Miracles are believed in. So are curses. Religion is everywhere. Let's walk now to the convent school. A rare place. Few children receive religious instruction beyond rote prayers, but some, especially those intended for the church, learn to read and write. Latin, scripture, psalms. But it is not just a school. It is a place of spiritual discipline. Young novices, sometimes only 8 or 9, are taught to confess daily, to fast, to mortify their flesh in small ways. Sleeping on hard benches. Wearing coarse undergarments. Practicing silence. This is not cruelty. It is virtue. To deny the body is to lift the soul. Even outside convent walls, ordinary children are taught the value of suffering. Hunger, pain, cold, these are not always evils. Sometimes they are tools of purification. To hurt now is to be closer to Christ, who hurt first. But religion isn't only fire and ash. There is joy too. Wonder. Mystery. Children are awed by the glow of candlelight on feast days. The thrill of processionals through the village. The scent of incense, the ringing of bells, the bright robes of Easter, the creche at Christmas. Stories of saints offer courage. Saint George slaying the dragon. Saint Margaret bursting from the belly of a demon. Even child saints, martyrs, innocents, held up as examples of bravery and devotion. And in these stories, children sometimes find themselves, not just as sinners, but as possible saints. It's a rare but potent thing, to believe your life, your suffering, your obedience might mean something eternal. Let's pause now beneath the great oak at the edge of the cemetery. Here, children play among the headstones, picking flowers, whispering ghost stories. They are not afraid of death. Not exactly. Death is familiar, predictable, even useful, as a reminder. Because every day, they are taught one simple truth. This life is not the point. The next one is. And that changes how a child sees everything. Pain becomes bearable. Rules become sacred. And growing up isn't just about working harder or being married off. It's about preparing for heaven. Or avoiding hell. We walk now slowly, back toward the village. You can see a boy helping the priest clean the altar. A girl lighting a candle for her grandmother. A child too small to understand, but already mimicking the sign of the cross. Faith, here, is not a choice. It is the water they swim in, the air they breathe, the fear that shapes them, the hope that keeps them still. They do not question it. They can't afford to. And in that silence, in that quiet, trembling obedience, their childhoods are carved. Now let's take the path leading beyond the village walls, beyond the chapel, the convent, the field of headstones. Because for some children, God is not the only master. There are other forces, less divine, more worldly. The weight of class, of wealth, of birthright. and those burdens shape children just as deeply as faith ever could. Stand with me at the crossroads. To the left, the dirt path continues into the village. Low cottages with sloped thatch, the scent of dung and damp straw, chickens pecking at the edge of a puddle. That's the peasant world, where most children are born. To the right, the road climbs. Stone replaces wood. A high wall rises with iron-bound gates. Beyond it, a manor house. Home to a lord, a lady, and their children, the noble few. 2 childhoods. 2 fates. Both medieval. But as different as wool and velvet. Let's begin with what is most obvious: wealth. Noble children are swaddled in fine cloth. Wool, yes, but dyed and lined with fur in winter. Their cradles are carved, their names recorded, their baptisms attended by priests of status. They sleep on feather-stuffed mattresses, beneath woven tapestries that block out the cold. In the peasant hut, the baby lies beside her mother on a straw-filled sack, wrapped in whatever rags are dry that day. There are no feathers. There are no tapestries. Just smoke from the hearth and the scent of boiled barley. Even their first meals differ. A noble infant might nurse from a wet nurse, carefully chosen, with proven health. A peasant baby drinks from his mother, if she can. If not, he might not drink at all. Now let's follow both children into early life. In the manor, the noble boy, let's call him William, is surrounded by servants. A nursemaid bathes him. A tutor teaches him Latin prayers. A groom lifts him into a tiny saddle, guides him around the paddock on a pony far too gentle to run. In the village, the peasant girl, perhaps named Emma, is already helping her mother sort beans. Her hands are grubby. Her hair is unbrushed. No one is teaching her Latin. She's too busy learning to scrape mud from shoes and catch chickens by the legs. It would be easy, wouldn't it, to stop here? To call William lucky and Emma cursed. To say one childhood was full of promise, the other of hardship. But the truth, as always, is more complicated. Because noble childhoods came with their own strange burdens. Freedom? It was a luxury even many noble children never tasted. Let's return to William. He's 6 now. He eats well, yes, meat, cheese, honeyed cakes, but he eats only what he's served. He must use the correct knife, drink from the correct cup, speak only when addressed. He can't run through the fields. He can't wrestle in the dirt. He cannot, under any circumstance, be seen bare-legged or barefoot. His world is structured, ritualized, watched. And it gets more rigid with age. At 7 or 8, he is sent away, to another noble house. Not as punishment, but to begin his training as a page. This is how nobility raises its children, by exchanging them. You send your son to Lord Edmund's household. Lord Edmund sends his to yours. They are taught etiquette, horsemanship, martial discipline, and, above all, loyalty. Not to parents. To patrons. Imagine being 8 years old and sent from home, expected to learn swordplay and service, to keep your posture straight for hours, to attend feasts where mistakes bring shame to your name. Noble children live in golden cages. And while they may never know hunger, they often know fear. Emma, meanwhile, is growing strong. Her life is muddy and cold and filled with risk, but also with freedom. She roams fields. She helps deliver lambs. She hears gossip from her mother, old legends from the alewife, dirty jokes from her uncle. She learns the names of herbs, the moods of cows, the shape of the moon's shadow on the barn. She is not watched constantly. She is used, yes, but she is also seen. And that has its own kind of value. Now, let's talk about education. For noble boys, learning is a path to leadership. They study Latin, law, rhetoric. They learn to read charters and negotiate alliances. Their handwriting is stiff but legible, trained by clerks who bark if the quill wobbles. Girls, if educated at all, are taught to read the Psalter, to write clean lists, to manage correspondence and inventory for the estate. They must sing, embroider, dance. Not for pleasure. For marriage. A noble girl's worth is not in her mind. It is in her manners. Peasant children? Most are illiterate. But not ignorant. They learn by doing. By repetition. By proximity. A blacksmith's son learns to hear when the metal sings right. A herdsman's daughter knows the difference between sick milk and healthy. They learn to calculate with beans, to count time by chores, to read the weather by the sky. Their knowledge isn't written, it's embodied, practical, instinctive, and often astonishingly precise. And what of punishment? Noble children are disciplined behind closed doors. A whip, a lecture, a public scolding at court. The pressure to perform, to not disgrace the family name, is constant. A single blunder might mean being passed over for a marriage alliance, or a position, or even inheritance. Peasant children? Their punishments are more direct. A swat. A chore. A public scolding in the street. But oddly, their failures don't carry the same generational weight. No one expects a peasant child to rise above. And so, paradoxically, there's less to fall from. Let's pause now. Look across the meadow. A noble girl, 12 years old, rides past on a high-stepping palfrey. Her hair is braided in ribbons. She keeps her spine straight, eyes forward, lips tight. She is about to be married. She has never kissed a boy. She has never boiled water. She has never spent a day alone. Behind her, a peasant boy, muddy to the knees, drives a cart of turnips, whistling. He is 10. He has seen death. He has held a dying lamb in his arms. He can carry twice his weight. He has never tasted honey. 2 children. 2 universes. And yet, if you strip away the walls, the clothes, the titles, they both want the same things. To be warm. To be useful. To be praised. To be safe. To be seen. That's the truth buried beneath all the hierarchy. Beneath the wool and velvet, the barns and the chapels. Children are children. They suffer. They adapt. They dream. And while the shape of their lives may differ, the ache within is often the same. To be loved. To be free. To matter. And now, as the sun slips low over the hills, we follow them both, the noble girl to her marriage, the peasant boy to his hearth, and prepare to witness the moment when childhood ends. Not gradually, not gently, but with a sudden turn. A red stain. A vow. A contract. A plow in your hand. Or a ring on your finger. There is no teenage grace period here. There is only the moment when the world stops calling you a child, and starts expecting everything. And that moment is what comes next. There's no ceremony. No candlelit transition, no proud speech or soft farewell. One day, you're a child, small, curious, watching from the margins. The next, the world expects something from you. Something heavy. Something real. And once it begins, there is no going back. In the Middle Ages, childhood didn't end with a driver's license or a graduation robe. It ended the moment your body, or the world, declared it was time. And for most, that came early. Let's begin with the body. Puberty wasn't just a biological shift, it was a social trigger. A girl's first blood wasn't whispered about. It was noticed. Often by everyone. It meant one thing universally: she could be married. We stand now in a village square. The girl beside us, 15, maybe younger, is being fitted for a linen veil. Not because she's taking holy orders. Because she's getting married this afternoon. Her betrothed? A man of 30. Not unkind. But twice her age. No one blinks. She is not seen as a child anymore. She is a wife. A future mother. She's never held a book. She has held a plow. This is the line between child and adult, not age, but utility. A girl who can bear children becomes a woman, regardless of her years. A boy strong enough to lift a scythe becomes a man, whether he understands what it means or not. There's no teenage limbo. No soft space to find yourself. You become useful, or you become invisible. Let's move now to the field, where a boy, 12 perhaps, is gripping the handles of a plow for the first time. The wood is rough. The oxen unsteady. His father watches, nods once, and walks away. No instructions. No applause. Just expectation. This boy's name is Peter, and today is his first full day as a laborer. His back will ache tonight in ways he can't yet imagine. His skin will blister. But if he handles it well, if he doesn't complain, he might be offered a more permanent place in the fields. Maybe even pay. Maybe. For him, this is the beginning of adulthood. Not a celebration. A chore. Elsewhere, a girl is led into a convent. She is 11. Too poor for a dowry. Too delicate for labor. She takes the veil in a small ceremony with no music, no feast. Only her mother, quietly weeping behind her. She will spend the rest of her life behind those walls. She is not a bride. Not in the earthly sense. But she, too, is no longer a child. There's something haunting about how quickly the shift occurs. One mistake, one confession, one burst of blood, one signed parchment, and suddenly the weight of adulthood slams down like a stone door. You are in it. And no one looks back. Let's pause in the manor now. A noble boy is dressing in a padded tunic. His tutor fastens the belt around his waist. Today, he will carry a real sword for the first time. Not just a wooden one. Real steel. He's 13. Tonight, he'll serve wine at the high table. Tomorrow, he'll ride in a hunting party and be expected to hold his own. He doesn't smile. He doesn't ask questions. He bows his head as the steward gives instructions and says, "Yes, sir," because asking for time, for patience, would sound like weakness. And weakness, in this world, has no place. Some children transition through apprenticeship. Around age 10 or 11, a child might be bound over to a master. Not as a casual helper, but as a legal agreement, a promise to work and learn for 7 years in exchange for room, board, and skills. 7 years? That means if you're apprenticed at 11, you'll finish at 18, an adult in full, with calloused hands and maybe a craft to call your own. If you finish. Because apprentices who failed, who fled, who complained too much, were beaten. Or worse, expelled. And with no trade, no home, no prospects, they'd become vagabonds. And vagabond children didn't last long. Even among the nobility, the end of childhood was abrupt. A noble girl of 12 might be sent to another household to learn how to manage a manor. To supervise servants, track expenses, entertain guests. By 15, she could be a lady of her own house. Married. Bearing heirs. Managing estates. Writing letters on behalf of her husband while he's at war. Imagine that. You've just learned to write your name, and suddenly, you're managing livestock rosters and negotiating grain prices. That was adulthood for many noble women. No training wheels. No practice round. Just expectations. Let's walk once more to the village tavern. It's loud here. A group of boys, 14, 15, are clustered near the hearth. Laughing. Swearing. Pretending to be men. But the barmaid doesn't treat them like children. She eyes them carefully. She knows which ones are newlywed, which ones are working full-time, which ones are still nursing bruises from their first failed attempts at love. They're not boys in her eyes. They're men who haven't figured it out yet. And no one's going to help them. Childhood doesn't end in one moment for everyone. But it does end suddenly. and without warning. For some, it's the first time they're left alone in the woods with a task. For others, it's the wedding feast, bitter wine in strange hands and the knowledge that the life you lived yesterday is gone. For others still, it's a funeral. Burying a parent, a sibling, a baby of your own. Nothing makes you grow faster than grief. And yet, some small part of that child remains. Even after the veil, the marriage, the plow, the sword. You can hear it in their songs, in the way they hold on to a favorite tool, in the carved token they keep in their pocket, in the smile they give a younger sibling learning the same lesson they just survived. The child is gone, but not erased. The Middle Ages were harsh, but the people, the children, were not made of ash. They were made of iron, and river water, and the quiet, stubborn refusal to break. Let us now pause. The sun has set. The cottages are quiet. And the children, those who made it through the day, sleep now. Not in comfort, but in readiness. Because tomorrow, they will rise again. Not as children, as whatever the world needs them to be. But before we sleep, there's one more truth to face. Some children didn't get to rise. Not because of hunger, or plague, or punishment, but because they were left behind. And that, my friend, is where we must go next. The sky is pale gray this morning. Not stormy. Just tired. Heavy with mist that never quite becomes rain. You hear a door creak open. A pair of worn shoes scraping against cold stone. And then softly it closes again. A figure walks down the lane, hunched, slow, carrying something wrapped in wool. It's a woman. Not old. Not young. Her eyes are fixed forward, her jaw clenched, as she approaches the church. In her arms is a bundle. A baby. She walks faster now, her breath catching. Reaches the steps. Sets the bundle down gently against the chapel wall, beneath a wooden statue of the Virgin. Then she turns and walks away. Not a glance back. She does not cry. She cannot afford to. And just like that, in a quiet village on a damp morning, a child disappears from their family. This is abandonment. It wasn't rare. It wasn't even shocking. It was, tragically, expected. In the Middle Ages, survival didn't leave room for sentiment. If a family couldn't feed another mouth, if a baby was born sickly, or illegitimate, or simply untimely, it was not unusual for that child to be given away, or left behind. Not always out of cruelty, sometimes out of love. Because in a world of famine, war, disease, and poverty, abandoning a child might save their life. Let's walk through the market square now. It's busy, but not cheerful. A few children dart through the crowd, carrying baskets of root vegetables. One of them is small, perhaps 5 or 6, and alone. She doesn't belong here. No mother nearby. No family calling her name. She hovers near a fish stall, her fingers twitching toward the table, then away. The merchant sees her. Says nothing. He knows her story. She appeared in town a week ago. No one asked where she came from. No one wanted to know. Because questions make things complicated. This is how abandoned children survive, by vanishing into the crowd. Some become beggars. Some are taken in by monasteries if there's space. Monks and nuns, moved by duty and faith, will sometimes raise them, feed them, clothe them, teach them to pray. But space is limited. Resources are tighter than hearts. And so, many are turned away. Others are sent into service. An unwanted child might become a servant in a wealthier home, washing floors and mucking stalls in exchange for meals and shelter. Some are treated kindly. Others are not. Still more are placed into apprenticeships early, as young as 6 or 7. Not to learn a craft, but simply to be somewhere else. Anywhere else. Now step with me into the alley behind the tavern. A boy crouches there, half asleep, with a crust of bread in one hand and a black eye fading on his cheek. His name is Martin. No one knows where he came from. He showed up last month, asking for work. The innkeeper lets him sweep the floor at night in exchange for scraps. He's not cruel. But he doesn't ask questions either. Martin doesn't speak much. His parents might be dead. Or they might be alive, somewhere, wondering. Or not. Orphans were everywhere. Not just from abandonment, but from plague, war, childbirth. Fathers died in the fields or on battlefields. Mothers died in labor. Sometimes entire households were wiped out by fever. And the children left behind? They had two choices. Be absorbed into another family, a monastery, a guild, or survive alone. There were no orphanages as we know them today. No state-run foster systems. Charity was local, informal, inconsistent. If you were lucky, a neighbor took you in. If not, the streets did. Let's step into the monastery gatehouse. Here, a monk is reading a ledger. Beside him, a girl sits on a stool, holding her little brother on her lap. They've been here 3 days. Their mother died last week. No one knows the father. They were left with a cousin. He refused to feed them. So they walked here. 20 miles? The monk asks their names, their age. He scribbles something in the margin. They'll stay. For now. The monastery has space. But they'll work for their bread. The girl will help in the kitchens. The boy will sweep the cloister walk. It's not love, but it is shelter. And that is more than many get. Now let's shift again, to the noble estate. You might think abandonment didn't happen here. But you'd be wrong. Noble families, too, gave up children, though rarely to the streets. A daughter deemed unsuitable for marriage, a son born out of wedlock, an infant born with a deformity, might be quietly sent away. To a convent. To a far-off estate. To a wet nurse, who didn't have a name. Sometimes even legitimate children were handed off, not out of rejection, but duty. It was considered proper for children of rank to be raised in the homes of others. Fostering was a common practice, not abandonment, but something that often felt like it. Children were moved like pawns, shifted for alliances, bartered in contracts, raised by strangers, and many never returned home. Not all of them wanted to. But still, the ache remained. That sense of being handed off. Sent away. Unchosen. You see, whether noble or peasant, the wound of abandonment is the same, the loss of belonging. That's what's hardest to survive. Not the cold. Not the hunger. The loneliness. That lingering question, why wasn't I kept? We pass by a cottage now. A woman sits in the doorway, mending a shoe. A boy beside her stares out at the path. His lips are tight. His jaw tense. She is not his mother. But she feeds him. Gives him a blanket. Asks nothing in return. She's not rich. She's not kind, exactly. But she is steady. And sometimes that's enough. Because abandonment isn't always final. Sometimes the world gives you back a place. Not the one you came from, but one that holds you anyway. And that can be enough to grow from. Now the evening bells ring again. Children return home, some to families, some to fires they'll sit beside in silence. Some have no name anyone remembers. But they sleep. They breathe. And tomorrow they'll wake again. One more day. One more chance to stay standing. Because in this world, being a child was never about innocence. It was about endurance. But even here, even in the shadows, there is love. Soft. Silent. Sometimes hidden. And that is what we'll find next. Not the kind of love you read in stories. The kind that survives, without being spoken. The fire's nearly out. Just a soft pulse of orange flickering at the base of the hearth. Smoke curls upward, not quite escaping through the chimney, settling instead in the low rafters. In the corner of the cottage, 3 children sleep like a pile of rags, tangled together, bare feet touching, breathing slow and shallow. Their mother sits nearby, motionless, eyes fixed on the coals. She's sewing something. A patch for a tunic. A heel for a sock. But her hands have slowed. She's listening. Not for wolves or bandits. For coughing. The baby had a cough earlier. Wet and deep. That kind of cough. She doesn't go to him. Not yet. Not unless it starts again. She's learned not to hover. Hovering makes it worse. Hovering invites fear, invites hope, and those are luxuries she can't afford. You see, this is a mother who's buried children before. She knows the science. She knows the weight of a child's body when it stops shifting at night. And still, she loves. But it is not a loud love. Not a fussy love. Not the kind of love you'd recognize from the soft pastels of modern lullabies. This love is quiet. Steeled. Contained. In the Middle Ages, love for children was a risk. An emotional gamble in a world that took children often and quickly. Half of all babies didn't survive past their 5th birthday. Many didn't survive the week. Imagine that. Imagine holding a child in your arms and knowing that you probably won't get to watch them grow. So what do? Do you close your heart? Or do you open it and brace for the break? Historians have argued for years about whether medieval parents loved their children. Some point to the practicality, the distance, the lack of visible sentiment in many texts and wills. Others say the love is there, just masked by a different culture, a different vocabulary. Because if a father doesn't kiss his son before sending him into the fields at age 7, does that mean he feels nothing? Or does it mean that affection in this world is shown not with kisses, but with boots that fit, with bread saved from supper, with a quiet hand on the shoulder when no one is watching? We walk now into a different cottage. A father and son are mending fishing nets. The father's hands are thick with old scars, his brow lined with years of salt and wind. The boy is quiet, focused. His fingers aren't fast yet, but he's trying. The father doesn't praise him, doesn't say a word. But when the boy misses a stitch, the man leans over, not to scold, but to guide. He shows him how to loop the twine, slow and patient. Then he hands the needle back. No words. Just a glance that says again. And the boy nods. That is love. In noble houses, the affection looks different. A lord might rarely see his children. They're raised by nurses, tutors, stewards. But sometimes, a father will take his son hunting, not because he wants to correct his posture or inspect his form, but because he wants to be with him. Even if either of them can say so. A noblewoman might embroider her daughter's name into a handkerchief and tuck it into her traveling bag before sending her off to another estate. Not because the girl will need a handkerchief. Because she wants to give her something with her hands. Something soft, when everything else is sharp. The Middle Ages were not a time of soft parenting. They couldn't be. Survival didn't allow for it. A child who didn't obey could die. A child who didn't work could starve. Discipline wasn't a contradiction to love, it was part of it. To spare the rod wasn't mercy. It was neglect. That's how they saw it. So parents hit. Scolded. Expected. And they did it because they cared. Because they feared for their children's souls, their futures, their place in the brutal machine of life. And yet tenderness lived in the cracks. In lullabies murmured during the night shift. In prayers whispered by candlelight. In the choice to give your child the last bit of cheese, even when your own stomach ached. Love showed up in blankets mended 3 times over. In a mother's body growing thin so her children could eat. In a father who took a second job hauling stone, though it bent his spine, because his daughter needed a dowry, and he refused to sell her short. Sometimes it appeared when a child died. That's when the silence cracked. When the love became visible. Some parents wept openly. Others collapsed inward. Some named their next child the same as the one they lost, a ghost carried forward, a wound given new breath. Others never spoke the lost name again. There's a graveyard just outside the chapel, low and lumpy, with wooden markers tilted in the wind. If you look closely, you'll see the same names appear again and again. Not because the family lacked imagination, because the ones who bore those names before didn't survive. And the parents couldn't let go, or couldn't afford to start fresh. So they gave the name again. Gave it another chance. That too is love. And sometimes, just sometimes, it wasn't enough. But they gave it anyway. Let's return now to the little cottage where the baby coughed. The mother's eyes are closed. Her sewing has fallen into her lap. Her head rests against the wall. She's listening still. And the baby? He breathes. Still. That's all she needs tonight. She won't wake him. Won't stroke his hair. Won't sing. But in the morning she'll give him the bigger half of her bread. She'll let him sit by the fire. She'll sew a patch onto his tunic with extra care. That is how love works here. Not loudly. Not always kindly. But fully. Quietly. Relentlessly. And now we step back out into the frost-tipped night. The village sleeps. Some with full arms. Some with empty cradles. But all, in some way, still holding on. Because to love a child in the Middle Ages was not a rite. It was an act of courage. There is no single moment when it happens. No chorus of voices declaring, "Now you are grown." And yet, somehow, you know. The line has been crossed. One day, you were small enough to be carried. The next, your feet must carry the weight of a full life. In the Middle Ages, there were few formal rites of passage for children. No birthdays marked with fanfare, no sweet sixteenths, no golden balloons or glittering cakes. But still, childhood ended through events. Through thresholds. Through blood, vows, and tools pressed into small hands. For girls, one of the most defining moments was often unseen by anyone else. It came quietly. Sometimes painfully. In a bed of straw, or crouched behind a barn, or while carrying water home from the stream. The first bleed. Menstruation marked a shift in a girl's body, but more importantly in her role. It meant she was ready for marriage, for motherhood, for all the obligations that would now anchor her life. Whether she was 11 or 16, her body no longer belonged only to herself. It had entered a new economy, one of dowries, alliances, and expectations. There was no parade. No congratulations. Just a new level of watchfulness from her parents, a sudden gravity in how others spoke to her. For some, it was followed by betrothal. For others, by confinement to protect virtue. A few entered convents around this time, either by choice or pressure, exchanging one threshold for another. There were no written rules. Just outcomes. For boys, the shift came differently, not in blood, but in burden. Their rite of passage was not internal, but visible. Physical. Perhaps it was the first time they plowed a field without help, or delivered a message between estates, or were trusted to walk to market alone, carrying coin and a list. It might have been the day a father handed down a knife, or a tradesman gave them their own set of tools, stamped crudely with initials scratched into iron. There were ceremonies in some towns, particularly among guilds, where a boy was formally made an apprentice. But even these were more contract than celebration. A boy stood before a master and agreed to years of service. In return, he was clothed, fed, taught a trade. That was his future, signed and sealed before his voice had finished changing. No candles. No blessings. Just the start of long hours and stiff hands. And yet, some transitions were marked with ritual, especially for noble children. A noble boy might undergo a dubbing, a formal ceremony to make him a knight. It was rare, costly, and mostly reserved for those whose families could afford it. But when it happened, it was elaborate. He bathed the night before to purify the body. He prayed alone in chapel, cloaked in silence and armor. And at dawn, he knelt before a lord or king who touched his shoulder with a sword and declared him not a child, but a knight of the realm. It sounds romantic, doesn't it? But remember, that title came with blood. He was expected to fight, to kill, to die with honor. Many dubbed at 15 or 16 never made it past 20. For noble girls, rites were more subdued and more personal. Marriage was the defining ritual, often arranged from childhood and formalized at puberty. Some were wed before their first cycle, others immediately after. The wedding might be grand or modest, but the effect was the same, the end of childhood, and the beginning of an adulthood that often meant pregnancy within the year. Let's not forget the spiritual thresholds either. First confession, first communion, taking of the veil, entering the monastery. These weren't casual events. They changed everything. A child who entered the religious life gave up more than possessions. They gave up family, freedom, even their own name in some cases. They became someone else. Someone sacred. Someone bound. And sometimes someone safe. Because for a few, these rites were not traps, but escapes, from marriages they didn't want, from poverty, from abuse. A convent could be cold, but it could also be kind. The final, most universal rite? Work. When you were handed a task that no longer came with guidance. When no one hovered to correct you. When you were expected to do, not learn. That's how most children knew. They were no longer growing up. They had grown. Even if they didn't feel ready. Even if no one told them. Because readiness didn't matter here. The world did not wait. You didn't need a beard or breasts or books to be considered useful. You just needed to endure. And that endurance was its own kind of adulthood. We walked now past the fields, past the convent, past the smithy, where a boy no older than 13 hammers nails into a wagon wheel. No one is watching him. No one is helping. The rhythm of his labor is confident, even as his face is still boyish. This is his right. He will not celebrate it, but he will remember. And one day, he may watch his own son hammer the same wheel, or his daughter walk toward marriage, veil tugging in the wind. And he will say nothing. Because the past does not explain itself. It just echoes. And so the children of the Middle Ages became adults not through words, but through moments. Moments that stayed. Moments that shaped. Moments that whispered, "You are no longer a child." And once the world whispered that, you listened. And you didn't look back. A fluorescent light buzzes faintly above. Somewhere, a microwave beeps. A child slouches at a desk, pencil tapping rhythmically on lined paper. The room is bright, the walls pinned with colorful posters and laminated rules. Be kind. Work hard. Use your words. A teacher corrects a worksheet with red ink. The bell rings. Children spill into the hallway. Backpacks bouncing, sneakers squeaking against tile. We are far, far from the Middle Ages. And yet, not everything is gone. Look closely. Listen carefully. Some things, small things, strange things, still carry the imprint of the medieval world. Let's start with school. The idea of education for all children, boys and girls, rich and poor, is a relatively new invention. In the Middle Ages, education was a privilege, a scarcity, a gateway for a chosen few. And even now, centuries later, the way schools function still holds a few relics of those origins. The desks in rows. The raised platform at the front of the room. The silence expected. The punishment for disobedience. Much of that structure echoes monastery classrooms, where young boys sat in stiff-back silence, reciting Latin psalms, their fingers calloused from gripping quills and their minds always under scrutiny. Even the idea of standardized testing carries a whisper of medieval examination, not for knowledge alone, but for obedience, readiness, potential worth. But let's go deeper. Into the home. You might think our ideas of discipline have changed entirely. We no longer wield birch rods. We rarely speak of sin and damnation to children, at least not in the old fire and brimstone tone. But the idea that a child must be shaped, controlled, corrected, civilized, still persists. That childhood is a time not of freedom, but of preparation. Some of us still hear old phrases handed down like relics. Spare the rod, children should be seen and not heard. Because I said so. These aren't just cranky slogans. They're echoes. Traces of a time when love and discipline were indistinguishable, when correction was salvation, and silence was virtue. Even our work ethic has shadows. Think of how we talk about children's time. Don't waste it. Keep them busy. Get them ahead. It's easy to forget, in the medieval world, idleness was dangerous. It invited sin. It signaled laziness. Children were not meant to play, they were meant to help, contribute, serve. And while we've created spaces for play and rest today, the pressure to prepare children for adulthood, college, jobs, productivity, still hums beneath the surface. We still ask children to become useful, to earn their worth early. We just dress it in different words. Even in gender roles, the Middle Ages left fingerprints. Think of pink and blue. Think of toy kitchens and toy swords. Think of the quiet steering. You're so strong. For boys. You're so sweet. For girls. We don't talk openly about marrying girls off at 12 anymore. But we still praise their appearance more than their strength. We still teach boys to be tough, to hide softness, to take up space without asking. And in some places, around the world, and yes, even here, child labor still exists. In fields. In factories. In families stretched thin by circumstance. Not medieval in name, but medieval in spirit. Even fear still lives in our parenting. Not always fear of hell or demons, but fear of failure. Fear of difference. Fear of not measuring up. We no longer threaten eternal damnation for a disobedient child. Now we threaten disappointment, shame, disconnection. What if you're not smart enough? Not good enough? What if you don't get into the right school? The right job? It's a different God now. But the worship of worth, and the punishment for falling short, remains. And yet, we've come so far. The fact that we can even ask these questions, can examine the past, challenge its shadows, is a sign of how much has changed. Children today are more protected, more educated, more valued as individuals than ever before in human history. We give them toys not made of bone and fire, but of soft plastic and safety labels. We listen when they speak, or we try. We give them names they keep, rooms they can decorate, choices sometimes. We no longer treat them as half-formed adults. We let them be children. At least, most of the time. The past is not a mirror, but it is a window. One through which we can see not only who we were, but who we still are. So when we pause and hear ourselves say, "Because I said so," or when we sigh at a child's play and mutter, "They need to grow up," it might be worth asking, whose voice is that? Ours? Or one from long ago? The Middle Ages are gone. But some of their ghosts, gentle, grim, and patient, still linger at the edge of the nursery door. And as we listen to them, we find ourselves asking, what kind of world are we shaping for the children of tomorrow? And how loudly do the whispers of the past still echo through the halls of our homes? Next, let us step once more into the archives, Not the dusty parchment ones, but the living ones. The questions that remain. The fragments. The gaps. The unknowns. Because for all we think we know about medieval childhood, some truths still hide in shadow. Somewhere, in the back of an ancient drawer in a forgotten monastery, there's a letter. Folded carefully, sealed once with wax long since crumbled to dust. Written in a hand that trembled. Maybe a mother. Maybe a father. Maybe a child. It was never sent. And we'll never read it. This is the nature of history. Not a perfect archive, but a field of missing pages. For all we know about medieval childhood, the labor, the laws, the rituals and punishments, there is so much more we'll never fully understand. Because the children of the Middle Ages didn't leave diaries. They didn't write their stories. Most of them couldn't write at all. They existed on the margins of parchment, mentioned in baptism records, marriage contracts, inheritance disputes, burial ledgers. They show up in other people's stories, but rarely their own. And so, we are left to guess. To piece together a picture from what survives. But pictures built on fragments are always incomplete. Take, for example, the question of affection. Did parents truly love their children in the way we understand love today? The records are silent, but silence does not mean absence. Just because few letters say, "I love you," doesn't mean it wasn't felt. Maybe they simply didn't write it down. Maybe love was spoken through actions, or left unspoken entirely, like the turning of bread toward a hungry mouth. We wonder too about play. What games did children invent that never made it into the chronicles? What rhymes did they whisper to one another under blankets of straw? What secrets did they keep? What jokes passed between siblings while scrubbing floors or fetching wood? We know some games, of course. Ones involving stones, sticks, bones. But we don't know the rules. We don't know the joy, or the arguments, that sprang from them. We don't hear the laughter. And what of fear? Not the fear of hell or punishment. Those were documented endlessly. But the quiet, private fears. The fear of being forgotten. The fear of waking up in a cold room with no mother beside you. The fear of failing to tie the right knot on your first day apprenticing. Of being whipped, not for wickedness, but for not knowing. How did children understand the world around them? Did they feel protected? Did they feel watched? Did they dream? And if they did, of what? We don't know. Because dreams don't get recorded in church records. There are other questions, too. What did children think of God, really? What stories did they invent to explain why some kids were rich and others starved? Did they blame themselves? Did they wish for more? Or did they accept their world completely, because they knew no other? One of the great tragedies of historical study is that it often elevates the voices of the powerful, kings, bishops, landowners, while silencing the rest. Peasant children didn't commission portraits. They didn't write memoirs. Their toys were not preserved in velvet boxes. Their scribbles were washed away by rain and time. And so we are left chasing ghosts. We dig into midden heaps and soil layers, searching for wooden dolls and scorched bones and scraps of leather shoes. We read legal codes and infer what they must have meant for a child. But we are guessing. And yet, even in the gaps, there is truth. Truth in the absence of records. In the very fact that children went unnoticed. It tells us something about who mattered, who was counted, who was heard. And so we keep asking. We ask because the asking itself is an act of respect. A way of saying, you were here. You mattered. Even if no one wrote your name. We wonder what songs you sang to yourself in the field. We wonder what you saw in the stars before sleep. We wonder who you missed. And who missed you. And sometimes, in the softest moments, we imagine what you might have said had you been asked. Because the truth is, history doesn't belong only to the crowned and recorded. It belongs to every child who never got to write their story. And perhaps, in telling it now, even in fragments, we bring them back, if only for a moment. Not as statistics, not as shadows, but as people. Small, tender, brave, and finally, remembered. Now come. One final chapter remains. A quiet walk toward the edge of the past. Toward the place where medieval childhood ends, and modern childhood begins. And so, we reach the edge. The road behind us is long, rutted with cart wheels and echoing with the bare feet of children who never knew they were supposed to be small. We've passed cottages and castles, fields and convent walls. We've listened to lullabies murmured under breath, watched labor-hardened hands lift spoons to trembling mouths, and we've seen too many beds left empty before their time. But now we stand at a threshold. Not another village. Not another chapter. Something wider. The shift from then to now. Because here's the truth you've probably already felt in your chest, even if you couldn't name it. The way we see children today, as precious, protected, sacred, is not ancient. It is recent. Stunningly so. For most of human history, childhood was not a garden. It was a path, steep, cold, lined with stone, and the only thing that mattered was whether you could walk it without falling. Children were born into purpose. To work. To wed. To inherit. To serve. Their names were written on ledgers, not lullabies. Their value was measured in crops carried, heirs produced, prayers memorized. And if they died before their feet had grown into their shoes, the world, often, kept turning. That's the legacy we inherit. A legacy of children who weren't allowed to be children, who were hardened before they could soften, who were given tools before toys, vows before dreams. And yet, from that soil, cracked, cold, unyielding, grew something new. Slowly. Painfully. But it grew. In the centuries that followed, people began to ask different questions. What if children needed more than discipline? What if play mattered? What if minds took time to form, and hearts needed more than obedience? The Enlightenment brought curiosity. The 19th century brought reform. Child labor laws. Public education. The idea that children should be taught, not just trained. That they might be curious, imaginative, worthy of joy. By the 20th century, the notion of a protected, playful, emotionally nurtured childhood began to take shape. A nursery instead of a workshop. A bedtime story instead of a chore. A chance to grow before being used. And it is easy now, dangerously easy, to take that for granted. To think of childhood as universal. To imagine it always looked this way. But it didn't. It was earned. Fought for. Demanded by those who believed a child should be more than a tool. And still today, even now, it is uneven. Unequal. In many parts of the world, children still labor too young, suffer too often, and grow too fast. The past is not gone. It simply wears new clothes. And so, this story isn't just about what was. It's about what still is. And what could be. Because when we understand where childhood came from, when we see what it once was, we stop assuming it will always be safe. We start protecting it. Not just for our children, but for all. Every desk. Every swing set. Every gentle, "Are you okay?" offered to a crying child. They're all echoes of a promise the past never made. But one we can. Now the road is quiet. The children of the Middle Ages, so many nameless, fierce, forgotten, fade gently into the mist. But not before leaving their mark. Not before reminding us what it meant to be small in a world that asked too much, too soon. And not before passing the torch, to us. To remember. To hold gently. To keep the fire lit. Because to be a child in the Middle Ages was not to be carefree, or coddled, or cradled in innocence. It was to be alive, barely, in a world that didn't wait for you to grow up. And so, as the night settles, may these echoes of the past guide you gently into dreams. Sleep well.